Special thanks to Tokyo Treat and Sakurako for sponsoring today's video. Well, here we are again. I'm currently in the process of writing my full review of episode 28 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime, but there is just so much I want to talk about right now. Already, these episodes have brought us huge teases and revelations, and naturally I've been dying to discuss everything Soul King related in particular. I went into episode 28, as you know, hoping to get a substantial flashback dedicated to the Soul King, or Adnyeus, as he should now be called. I'm not sure I'll ever get used to that, to be honest. And while we didn't technically get that, at least not in full, we were treated to more tantalizing snippets, visions, and strange sequences. In other words, the endless theory crafting continues. So, in today's video, I want to take a look at the opening sequence of episode 28, Kill the King, and try to discern exactly what's going on. What are we seeing here? At the same time, I want to compare it to the mysterious images we saw in episode 16, when Ichigo walked the divine path of Irazu Sando and was shown the fate of Ryo himself for the first time, as well as the flashback at the start of episode 24, featuring a much younger Yhwach, albeit not as young as the version we see in this week's installment. What can this sequence tell us about the history of Adnyeus and his son, if anything at all, and what else might we learn in the future? Let's find out. Before we get started, however, if you enjoyed this video when you're finished with it, and you want to stay up to date with more videos from me over the course of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime part 3, then make sure to hit subscribe to ensure you get every single video I put out. I really do appreciate it, and it does help the channel very much. So, to begin with, how did this peculiar sequence unfold in the anime? What do we actually see on a frame-by-frame basis? I mean, it's not very long. As the episode begins, Yhwach's final line of episode 27 plays once more. "Farewell, Soul King, the one who has seen the future, my father." As he says this, a pair of eyes open in the darkness. Each eye has 4 irises, and they're all glittering with a rainbow spectrum of colour. These must be the eyes of the Soul King himself, though we've never seen them quite so alive before. Immediately afterwards, we see a very young Yhwach standing in water that rises up to his chest. The area around him is hazy and dreamlike, with the water taking on a strange colour almost akin to a bronzed sunset. Coils of smoke drift upon the water's surface. This version of Yhwach looks like Tensa Zangetsu, which we've previously only seen once before, during chapter 565 God Like You and its adaptation in the anime. A very mysterious, intriguing, and melancholy soundtrack plays over the top of this sequence. Again, it feels very ethereal, as though we really are peering back into the ancient past, a time that has never been seen before. Yhwach appears to be looking at someone. A figure stands quite some way away from him, the horizon appearing as a brilliant blue glow where the sky meets the sea. The figure is holding something in an outstretched arm. We then return to Yhwach. He's older now, at an age we've never seen him before. So if Tensa Zangetsu Yhwach is supposed to represent the Quincy King as a child, then this must be a teenage version of the character. We then zoom in on the faraway figure, or their arm at least, as they're seen to be holding a very unusual sword. We know this figure to be Adnyeus himself, the only instance we've ever seen him prior to his sealing. The sword he's holding is ceremonial in design, with a strange lock-like mechanism at the top, which he grips via a rounded handle. The Soul King hovers the sword just above the water's surface, and then the camera pans away, taking us above the scene. Here we see an image that we have seen before in the past, albeit a little clearer now. Adnyeus is surrounded by 3 objects, the 3 of them arranged in a triangle shape. Suddenly, ripples begin to spread from the 3 fixtures as the water begins to churn. We then see an older Yhwach again, now with a design that looks similar, closest to how he appeared 1,000 years in the past, except with slightly longer hair. As he continues to stare at his father, he's suddenly swallowed up by the churning water as the ripples reach him, sending him beneath the surface. Yhwach is seemingly dragged helplessly under the water, and as he falls deeper and deeper, he rapidly grows younger and younger until he's nothing but the baby we see in godlike Yu, the same baby that was later found and worshipped by humanity. After this, we see some more of the same images that we've seen before. Rayo's body falling apart as he grips the sword, his body parts scattered within the sea around him. What remains of Adnyeus, his torso and head, fall face first into the waters, and all that's left is the Soul King that we know. As we then see a vision of a young Yhwach with tears rolling down his face, we witness him being lifted up by the people, growing stronger once again as his body and former strength returns to him. He asks if someone can hear the screams within his heart, the voices of the Forsaken. It looks to me, based on the fact that Ichigo is receiving this vision, that Yhwach is asking Ichigo himself this, almost as though he's trying to make him understand his point of view. So that's how episode 28 opens. It's definitely odd, it's definitely abstract, but it's fascinating all the same. To this day, the Soul King and everything revolving around the Primordial Age remains Bleach's biggest question, and still the one element of the story that I want to know more about. And slowly but surely, agonizingly so, the curtain is being pulled back. Probably the easiest way of tackling this is just to go through each shot and talk about what we know, and what we maybe think is happening or what it possibly means. Up first we have the shot of Adnyeus' eyes, alive and shimmering with colour. Every time we have seen Rayo in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc so far, his eyes have been totally blank. Each of the 4 irises per eye are simply dark, with no light reflected whatsoever, symbolising his catatonic state. While not dead, Adnyeus is trapped in a permanent state of living death. But here, as his eyes open within the darkness, this is the only time we've seen them full of life. I even wonder, considering this total complete darkness around him, if this is the birth of Adnyeus himself when he came into being. Whether his eyes always looked this way or not is a mystery. The rainbow of colours may simply be symbolic, but for a character upon whom the entirety of creation is reflected within his gaze, I could definitely see his eyes actually looking like this. For my part, during my live reaction, I theorised the multitude of colours was a reference to the different races of the Bleach universe, as we saw when Ichigo walked the road of Irazu Sando and received all of the Soul King's power, to see if he could bear it. In regards to the glittering eyes we see here, though, I've seen tons of theories, both in the comments of my last video and on places like Reddit, discussing Yhwach's incantation for Al's Valen, and what other secrets it could be hiding. Specifically revolving around the idea that agate, which is mentioned in the chant, might mean something significant, even potentially the name of Yhwach's mysterious angelic mother. Some fans have noted the kaleidoscopic appearance of agate itself, and how that might line up with the spectrum-like colours of Adnyeus' eyes, as well as the fact that agate itself is often a symbol for balance. To be honest, I'm not sure where I stand on all of this just yet, but one thing is for certain. With Adnyeus himself explicitly being mentioned in Yhwach's chant, that chant is definitely more important now than ever, and worth being picked apart. Coffin of Adnyeus is definitely an interesting and very deliberate feeling entry. I wonder if by coffin it's referring to the crystal Rayo is imprisoned with. Maybe some of the materials listed here in the incantation all have something to do with Rayo's coffin. Before we move on, I want to take a look at one of the episode's key cards, which depicts the splitting of the three worlds, as I think it will give us necessary context for the remainder of the video. For this, I'm using a translation provided by Neonzel, so thank you for that. The card titled The Triplet World reads as such. The three worlds of the Soul Society, the world of the living, and Hueco Mundo were separated from the Primordial Sea. The foundation that controls the flow of souls everywhere and the wedge between the worlds separates the three worlds of the spirit world, the vessel world, and the paradise of sand, separating life from death. There are a few interesting things here, but I want to start with what stood out to me the most: the Primordial Sea. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the very first time the primordial world of Bleach has ever been referred to in such a way, as a sea, a body of water specifically. Now, whether the Primordial Sea is just one part of the original world or all of it is currently hard to know, but I do have a difficult time imagining characters like Yhwach or Adnyeus existing just within a body of water. But still, knowing this is the Primordial Sea is wonderful, but there's more. The text also mentions a spirit world, a vessel world, and a paradise of sand. Are these all part of the primordial world, or are they just different, perhaps ancient names for the Soul Society, the world of the living, and Hueco Mundo? If it's the latter, then this title card feels weirdly written to me. Why even call them that in the same paragraph as their original names, except to invite confusion and comparison? I wonder if these were the original names for ecosystems or areas that were all part of the original primordial mess that was the original world, and then they were specifically what was split apart from the Primordial Sea. And by the way, I wonder if the Primordial Sea still exists in some capacity. I mean, where would it have gone? What if it's the space between worlds? Right now, we only really know that as Garganta, but it could be anything. Anyway, let's continue with the flashback. We then see Yhwach standing in the Primordial Sea facing his father. Yhwach appears to age rapidly, but despite age being a bit of a sticky subject when it comes to Yhwach, I don't think we're supposed to take this literally. To me, I think this is meant to symbolise the idea that Yhwach lived much of his life in the primordial world, and for so long it was totally unchanging, undisturbed. Until suddenly, one day, his entire life is turned upside down. Again, whether the imagery of the ripples washing over Yhwach and effectively casting him out of their paradise should be taken literally or not, I'm not sure. But to me, that feels like it's supposed to represent the moment that everything changed for Yhwach. His father split the three worlds. He took this primordial sea that presumably they had been living peacefully in and ripped three worlds from it and created the cycle of life and death. In that moment, Yhwach was thrown from heaven, so to speak, in the same manner that Adnyeus's body parts would also later be. So again, to summarise, I think the different ages of Yhwach signifies that he lived a considerable portion of his life there in the primordial world with his father. However, when Rayo split the worlds, the ripples washed over Yhwach, figuratively or literally, we're not sure, and cast him into the cycle, changing his life forever. There's a couple of weird things about this though. For one thing, we know the Primordial Sea, or at least this part of it, isn't that deep. Adnyeus is seen carrying the ceremonial sword to the centre point in episode 16, and he's walking absolutely fine. His body is barely submerged. I guess it's possible that the sea is at its most shallow in the middle there where Adnyeus needs to stand, and that Yhwach is actually floating as opposed to just standing. Therefore, when he's dragged underwater, that's truly how deep it is there. Or again, perhaps more likely, it's just meant to be figurative, symbolising how Yhwach's world was transformed in an instant. Now, using what we know from the brief images shown in episode 16, we know that the fixtures Adnyeus seemingly uses to split the worlds are strange, striped arrows that suddenly glow with a powerful light. We'll touch on Can't Fear Your Own World a bit later, but so far the anime seems to be portraying events in its own way. While we still need a much better, more thorough look at what happens here, Adnyeus seems to be making the conscious decision to split the worlds himself, and this is reinforced by both Senjumaru and Yhwach himself seemingly believing that Adnyeus purposefully excluded the Quincy from his new world, as they can't exist within the cycle of rebirth based on the way their powers work. This is what Senjumaru meant last time when she said that the Quincy were forsaken by the Soul King, and it's why Yhwach later calls them the voices of the Forsaken, as we see an image of Rayo. There's just so much we still don't know. Why did Adnyeus' body fall apart when he enacted this ritual? Can't Fear Your Own World again explicitly mentions that it was the doing of the 5 noble ancestors. However, here in the anime, all we've seen so far is that it seems to be connected to this strange ceremonial sword that he's using, as his body falls apart while he grips the blade, and his hand is still holding the blade as his body parts end up in the sea. Also, did Adnyeus have any real control over how the worlds and the cycle of rebirth would end up? Did he knowingly exclude the Quincy, and did Quincy of this manner even exist in the primordial world? If Yhwach really is Adnyeus' son, then why isn't he a mix of all the races? Why is he just a Quincy, the one race that was seemingly forsaken, left behind? And does Adnyeus' supposedly leaving the Quincy out really jive with the idea that he despises the Shinigami as his true enemy? Everything that Yhwach is doing seems to be out of a desire to rescue his father from his humiliating position, out of a genuine love for Rayo. But if we're now going with the idea that Adnyeus has cast the Quincy out himself, where does that leave how Yhwach feels? Certainly so far in the anime, with the way they've given us Yhwach's clear-cut motivation, it feels more like he has a real grudge to bear with his father than anything else, as later on in the episode Yhwach explicitly states that even though Adnyeus foresaw the tragedy of the Quincy in the future, he still chose to abandon them anyway. But of course, there is still a long way to go in the anime yet, and we're only really just getting started with this Soul King stuff. However, before we continue with our Soul King speculation, first a message from today's sponsor. Are you tired of the same old disappointing candy every Halloween? Well, fear not, for this spooky season, Tokyo Treat and Sakurako are here to help.
In case the pumpkins didn't give it away, Tokyo Treat's theme this month is Snacktastic Halloween. This limited edition box comes packed with scary snacks and tricky treats straight from Japan, with each box containing a variety of full-size Japanese snack items, like unique Japanese chips and sodas only available in Japan for a limited time. As part of this spooktacular Halloween box, you'll receive Kit Kat apple pie, ghost gummies, a Halloween fruit juice potion, and more. Right, okay, so first up for our Halloween autumnal treats, we've got these little custard pies. Right, I love these. Oh no, lobster pie.
Bloopers.
These are like custardy ones. They smell really
They smell very strong.
Oh, I like them a lot.
Got it everywhere.
Right, so next up. This was Tom's choice. They're spooky spicy crackers. And it says...
I'm not great with spicy food.
It says, spicy numbing. Oh, wow.
Wow, they are actually quite hot.
That is really nice.
I think it's the peppercorn.
That is hot.
The peppercorn makes it reminds me of steak. They are a bit spicy.
Oh, I like them a lot.
I am experiencing
Assuming it's a good
spicy numbing. Now, for something a little different and perhaps a little less frightening, Sakurako's theme this month is the colours of Kyoto. As autumn descends on this historical city, Sakurako invites you to delight in some authentic snacks that marry seasonal flavours with cultural heritage, all while supporting local snack makers. Some of the snacks this time include the yuzu dorayaki, the matcha chocolate crunch, and the Gyo Sujiri Sencha tea, straight from Kyoto. Of course, Sakurako also includes a stunning piece of tableware each month, and this time you'll receive the floral Kamon Yumoni. a beautiful Japanese teacup. Right, first up from Sakurako this time, Jade, we are going to devour this cute little fella. This Kitsune Senbei, who is holding a key in his mouth.
He's so cute.
His ears come off very cleanly.
He is tasty.
There you go, he is tasty, yeah, there you go. He just has no ears now, it's not a big deal, not a big deal. Oh gosh, now he's dead. There you go.
I got the little...
That is a Momiji and chestnut wagashi, so we're going to try these now. They're filled with bean paste, I believe.
That's so sweet.
I mean, yeah, it tastes like a jelly, so it's quite cool, isn't it? Yours is different inside.
Mine's different.
And of course, each box comes complete with a detailed booklet that tells you everything you need to know, from all-important allergen information to the history behind the month's chosen theme. For example, you might think the Halloween theme is fairly straightforward, but it's fun to learn about how Halloween is celebrated in Japan, and how you can experience some of that from the comfort of your own home. But that's it for October's boxes. I normally hold the Tokyo Treat one. This is nice and compact by comparison. But as always, I want to say a big thank you to Tokyo Treat and Sakurako for supporting the channel by sponsoring today's video. And if you want to treat yourself or someone you know to one of these boxes, then make sure to follow the links down, both in the description or in the pinned comment, and use my code TOMO for $5 off your purchase. Thanks everyone, enjoy, and happy Halloween. Okay, so next up we have the scene where Yhwach is pulled under the water. We see that he rapidly grows younger and younger as he falls, until he becomes a completely jet black baby attached by a spiritual umbilical cord to something in the depths of the sea beneath him. At presumably the same time, though again I'm not sure, the Soul King's body falls apart above the surface. Before we begin this next section, is there any significance to the baby being covered entirely in black? The baby is depicted in the same way in the manga, but I initially, way back in the day, always thought it was just supposed to be emblematic of how the baby had nothing at the time, as though it was but a shadow, and slowly but surely light returns to it, as we see here. But now I'm wondering, could Ichibei have covered Yhwach in ink and removed his true name? We know that Yhwach is a name he gives himself, and we'll get to that a bit later, and we also know that Ichibei was present for Adnyeus' fall. So could he have tried to weaken Yhwach too? Perhaps he was afraid that there would be retribution in the future. Now once again, this is all speculation, but here's kind of what I think is happening. When Yhwach grows younger and younger, I think that's supposed to symbolize him entering the cycle of rebirth, becoming a newborn along with the rest of the universe as the three worlds are split. We know that Yhwach is later found in the human world as this helpless, shadowy baby, unable to see, unable to move, unable to speak. However, the humans that found him discovered something. He was magical, almost godlike. Those that laid their hands upon him realized that parts of themselves that were missing were now being filled. The baby was healing them in numerous ways, filling the cowardly with courage or fixing broken bodies, for example. However, it turns out that this is akin to making a deal with the devil. Those that touched the infant Yhwach wouldn't live for long. They would die quickly, as if being compelled to do so, and their new and improved souls would return to Yhwach, each soul he fed upon slowly helping him return to his former self. Interestingly, in the chapter God Like You, Kubo notes that despite his helplessness, the baby instinctively knew that he would survive. This tells me that some aspect of Yhwach was retained within even at this period of time, at this point in his life, and he knew deep down that he had the power to return to glory so long as he kept using the people of the world of the living. And of course, this is still happening today. Every sternritter has had a part of their soul filled, fixed, healed, or empowered by Yhwach. Anyway, back to the timeline. So Yhwach is essentially flushed out of heaven by the actions of his father, forcing him into the cycle of rebirth and transforming him into a newborn. This holy newborn is found by the people of the newly formed world of the living, who treat him like a deity. Slowly but surely, Yhwach leeches off of the people around him, returning himself to some form of life and power. He realizes they are calling him by a name, Yhwach, and decides to take it as his own. This idea that Yhwach has given himself a name, the name of a god specifically, is interesting too. Could it be that his real name is lost to history, especially if Ichibei really did cover him in ink before he fell to earth? Now, I'm not sure how literal this idea of them falling to earth actually is, but it is an image that we have seen and heard of before, specifically when the Soul King's right arm, Mimihagi, fell to earth. It may just literally mean they ended up in a certain place upon the splitting of the worlds, rather than actually falling from a physical plane above. I wonder as well if this is why Ichibei considers Yhwach to be human, because clearly originally he wasn't, but perhaps when he entered the cycle of rebirth he became one, albeit one with incredible powers. Over time, Yhwach grew to be the man he was 1,000 years ago, amassing an unstoppable empire at his fingertips. There are still a few small things I don't understand, however. We get that one shot of Yhwach with a tear running down his face, but this doesn't appear to be either the Tensor Zangetsu or the Old Man Zangetsu variant, meaning it's likely the teenage version seen earlier. But what is causing him to cry? Based on the voiceover at the time, it's because as soon as he enters the cycle of rebirth, he can suddenly feel the pain and hear the screams of the many dying souls in his new existence. A new burden placed upon him by his father's seemingly pretty selfish actions. But when is this taking place? Is it as he's now growing up in the human world? Because it kind of looks like the primordial world behind him though. Perhaps that's just an artistic choice. So maybe he felt an unrelenting sadness as he grew up in the human world over the next however many years before deciding to do something about the root cause of this anguish. And by the way, brief spoiler for upcoming episodes here, but during the Friend saga, it's mentioned in hearsay that Yhwach had been alive for 200 years by this point, and that's about 1,000 years in the past from the present day, making Yhwach only about 1,200 years old, at least the version we know. So, did it take him a very, very long time to amass the power necessary to become who he is? Or did he only appear in the world of the living 200 years prior to the Friend saga? It does kind of feel like Yhwach was put on the earth to shoulder the weight of those crying, screaming voices, and unsurprisingly he doesn't appreciate it much, especially if he does think the Soul King is responsible for forsaking them. In Yhwach's mind, it's like he and these people have been kicked out of paradise almost, left to fend for themselves and die, while he has to experience all of it. So he decides to take the fight to the Soul Society and later to the Royal Palace itself. There's one other thing I don't quite understand though. The flashback at the start, even if not taken literally, seems to imply that Yhwach has some knowledge of what happened to his father, but in episode 24, Ichibei reveals the truth to Yhwach and it shocks him as though he's never seen this in his life. I suppose it's possible, or a couple of things are possible here. One, it's possible that Yhwach fell to earth before Adnyeus' body was shattered, and I guess it's fascinating as well to imagine how Yhwach would feel after seeing that, after Ichibei shows it to him, and then seeing that Ichibei has taken his father's arm for his own use. Ichibei is definitely a perplexing piece of this puzzle, and in some ways I think he might be the key. He's someone who was around on that fateful day and someone who actually witnessed at least a piece of it, which is incredible to think. And then the second option is possibly that if Ichibei did have some hand in weakening Yhwach, in returning him to this pathetic state, maybe he also robbed him of his memories or something. Much later in the episode, Yhwach talks with Ichigo about what he saw, noting that it was once an eternal world, but darkness threatened it. And we'll get into this a bit more in the review, but the Soul King was said to have the power to repel the darkness, and I wonder, what exactly is this darkness Yhwach is referring to? I'm not really sure what the anime is depicting during this sequence. I think it's just the inside of the ceiling of the palace, but I'm not really certain about that. But anyway, here is where Can't Fear Your Own World possibly comes into play, where it expands upon Adnyeus' backstory a little bit. We know that the primordial world was overrun by hollows originally, and that the Soul King was essentially born into the world to protect its inhabitants from those monsters. Could this overrun of hollows be the darkness Yhwach mentions, the one that threatened their eternal world? After all, Rayo clearly had the strength to repel them. Or could it be a little deeper than that? Could the darkness be the sinister ambitions of the ancestors of the noble clans? They were said to seal the Soul King away, and despite his lack of resistance, they carved up and mutilated his body. Again, a darkness he could have repelled, but chose not to, instead bringing stability to the world rather than overturning it. But ultimately, this is all continued speculation on my part, and as you can see, there is still so much to learn and so much to discuss. Alright guys, but that's it for the video. As always, I really do hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got some value from it as well. Once again, this is all speculation on my part. We've gone through the entirety of the opening sequence of episode 28 in detail, great detail I think, and I've laid bare all of my thoughts and theories and what I think is maybe going on here. But as always, I'd love for you to join in the discussion in the comments below. Let me know if you think maybe I'm right about some of this, if you think I'm off base about any of it, and crucially, if you think I've missed anything as well, I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. And I'm hoping this isn't the end of the Soul King flashbacks. I am praying that we get even more maybe next week. But that's it for the video, guys. As always, I want to end by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, without who I simply wouldn't be able to do this. If you like what I do here on YouTube and you also want to take support from me another step further, thank you. By visiting the link to my Patreon in the description below and supporting me at the $1 tier, you can get your name in the credits of every single video just like this. And by supporting me at the $2 tier or higher, you can get every video I release absolutely free of baked-in YouTube ads. Okay everyone, thank you again so much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.